Born in Blood by COVID Candy. Chapter 381 Patience. As soon as the cloud leeches emerged from her mouth, they dug into the dense cloud and ethereally latched onto it. To the cloud leeches, it was as though the clouds were solids, not just perspiration. Then, they hung off like vines for the elders to hold on to. Jax guided Liam to a leech. As soon as Liam gripped the leech's tail, a ripple of aura passed through his hand and spread throughout his figure. To Jax's eye, he'd gone invisible, both from mental energy and vision. Nice. Works as intended, Jax said, grabbing onto a leech of his own. The other elders followed suit. Although they couldn't see each other, Liam could see them due to his king's eye. As such, the cloud slowly drifted forward towards the dual empire. Now that Liam thought about it, clouds were pretty much the perfect aerial device. Especially with something like the cloud leech. The elders could easily manipulate the cloud's speed with their wind elements. And it would never run out, since the elders could just feed it water, causing it to grow. In fact, that's why most of the elder that tagged along were either of the water or wind elements. Other than the sound of wind whistling past them, there was silence. Here and there, aerial magical beasts flew by, but Liam's group was completely unnoticed. The higher one flew, the more dangerous magical beasts they would find. It was the same as the ocean and its depths. The sky was just as terrifying, one could imagine. Since the world Liam was in was much bigger, the number of layers in the sky were more. That was also why clouds were so incredibly far away, and also why no one ventured too far up. Just as there were hidden horrors in the depths, there were hidden horrors in the skies. To pass the time, the elders struck up conversations. Jane and Aki were speaking to the imperialist, who was now toothless. Using her earth element, she conjured up a fake set of stone teeth to put in her jaw, muttering curses at Liam's ancestry. The temple elders didn't suppress their urge to tease her. Keep a close eye on her, Liam told Jax. He was referring to the imperialist. The binding oath only does so much. Jax nodded firmly. Afterwards, all that remained was patiently waiting. Liam glimpsed at the temple island, which continued to distance itself until it resembled a fingernail. Pretty soon, they were directly above Ucladd. Liam saw the 7 clans in the center. Their reputation ever since losing to the Temple of Shadow wasn't as shiny and renowned as it was before. But even they would come useful during the battle with the dual empire. The temple had allied with them, after all. Except the Moyong family, of course. Hand of Light wanted no part in whatever the temple and the Corson lands were cooking up. After a solid 8 hours, Liam passed through the entirety of Ucladd. Its lush landscapes and gentle rivers. Afterwards, it was just the ocean again. And it would continue that way for another 4 hours. The sun rose, and the warm rays of dawn slowly warmed Liam's skin. At that point, Liam was bored out of his mind. There was absolutely nothing to do. He couldn't cultivate. He couldn't swing his sword. He couldn't inscribe or forge. He was just stuck in limbo. That's the 48th time you've sighed till now, Elder Jax commented with a slight laugh. We'll be there soon. Liam's entire being was just itching for something to do. Wasting time like this was one of his biggest peeves, and it physically hurt. Nevertheless, he was patient. Thankfully, 2 hours later, the borders of the dual empire appeared in the distance. Liam's eyes lit up. The first thing he did was constrict his pupil as hard as he could to see the layout of the country. From Liam's point of view, he could only see the borders of the Empire of Fear. The Empire of Courage was not visible. They clearly appreciate their security, Liam thought. Any other method, and we definitely wouldn't get in. The borders to their country looked like rows of vicious teeth. It stretched for as long as the eye could see. Each one of these tooths were more than 60 meters tall, and 10 meters wide. It shone darkly beneath the sunlight, as though it was made from some lustrous obsidian. Upon these teeth were thousands of imperialists, all female, all wearing Roman togas. Clouds rolled above their country. Liam took a deep breath as he took a closer look at the clouds hovering beside his own. They were covered with imperialists, clutching onto cloud leeches. Instantly, Liam mentally ordered the imperialist's mouth to be covered, lest she let out a scream. Thankfully, she didn't. Liam glanced at the Empire of Fear once more. Past the borders, all Liam could see were uneven lands that looked as though they were slightly angled downwards. The lands themselves were shadowy and strange. Eerie in different ways. There was no lush landscape whatsoever, and no colors beside shadowy black, brown and dark blue. It was entirely barren past the border, and the sun failed to illuminate its surface. Black mist flowed through it. However, there were dark mountains and hills, along with very dangerous-looking environments. Regular humans wouldn't dare to survive in such a grim place. Not to mention, abominations infested the area. Nightmarish creatures that looked otherworldly. Liam couldn't see any civilization of sorts, but judging by the map he'd memorized, they were much deeper in. They were called colonies, where their strong would live. From the Empire of Fear side, there was no fixed system for rulership, other than the Empress herself. End.N. It was a dictatorship. Other than that, the strongest cultivators under her were like patrol guards, venturing out only when there was something of suspicion happening. By the time Liam was done with gazing everything over, they were past the borders. They had officially entered the country. Liam breathed a short sigh of relief. Now, all they had to do was find a colony, land, and slowly start wiping them out. Boom! The cloud leeches Liam and the elders were holding on to suddenly exploded. Along with the imperialist who exploded into a spray of flesh and blood. She'd broken her binding oath with a smile on her face, and the explosion sent Liam and the elders flying. Chapter 382 Abominations. 3 explosions happened. The cloud leeches, and the imperialist herself. A few fingers were flung off Liam's hand. His mind was momentarily rocked, causing his vision to swim. A layer of skin was gruesomely stripped off Jax's face. Elder Jane and Aki, along with 8 or more elders, were closest to the imperialist, and suffered the most. Jane lost an arm. Aki a hand. Ryu and all the other elders were in a similar situation. Some lost an eye or ear. Everyone was flung in different directions. The explosion was not normal in the least. The imperialist used everything in her being as a sacrifice. An abomination of some kind. But the force that spread from it wasn't normal. It affected the mind more than it did the body. Still, there were 36 elders aboard. The reflexes of a rank 4 zenith were not to be underestimated. But instead of protecting themselves, they did their absolute best to try and keep the explosion as quiet as possible. It was an instantaneous decision for the best possible outcome. Wind and water cultivators muffled the sound as best they could. Thankfully, there wasn't anyone hiding in the clouds surrounding them. The reason the imperialist had imploded herself here was for the border guards to notice the invaders. The border guards glanced at the area of explosion with confused expressions. A thunderclap, one imperialist said, confused. In broad daylight, another questioned, furrowing her brows. Where's the rain? Thunderclaps don't always have to follow rain, stupid, the first imperialist rebuked. It's something else. Plus, it's daytime. Rain doesn't always happen during the night either, retard, the second countered. Someone check that out, a higher-ranking imperialist said to them. Maybe they had faulty cloud leeches. Wouldn't be the first time. In truth, the vision of the imperialists wasn't made for long distances. They were specialized for the control of an abomination. Thus, they couldn't see the single humanoid figure dripping from the cloud like a raindrop. Fine, the first imperialist grumbled. She took off a strange, bird-shaped pendant from her neck, then threw it in front of her. KRSH. Blurg. Crack. The pendant expanded to form a gruesome-looking vulture, with an unnaturally long white neck, beady red eyes and powerful talons. The imperialist perched over the vulture, and it shot forward. Meanwhile, for Liam, there was a much bigger issue at hand. Liam was shooting towards the earth. at a very, very fast speed. The world spun around him, as though he'd been shoved inside a washing machine. 43 meters. His hair and cloak were dragged upwards, fluttering wildly. 97 meters. Liam steadied his head, enough to spare a glance at the elders. 162 meters. Jax's eyes darted around to look for him. 251 meters. Liam and Jax's gaze connected. They were exactly 280 meters apart. Both of them noticed the Imperialist steadily flying their way. If Jax were to shoot towards Liam, he'd get noticed. And the mission to covertly weaken the Empire of Fear from within would be flushed down the drain. Jax was about to go forward anyways, but Liam sent him a sharp glare, mouthing the words. Don't. Meet later. Hide. Liam uttered a nasty curse under his breath and twirled around, focusing his attention towards the ground. Right now, he was at a height of 1,300 meters, and with every 4 seconds, he plunged 100 more. Liam was no stranger to falling from great heights, but this took it to another level. It was so damn high. But strangely, there was another emotion Liam was feeling. An adrenaline-filled thrill. A smile appeared on his face. In an instant, Liam's eyes scanned the best possible landing place for him to crash into. Even at such a height, it wasn't impossible to survive. In fact, on Earth, there were several incidents of regular humans that fell from higher altitudes, but amazingly lived. The first step was to look at a suitable landing place. Liam's eyes constricted and he saw a giant, dark red, circular, fleshy thing. It was an abomination. Something that resembled a mushroom. Nevertheless, it looked soft, so Liam aimed for it. Next, Liam put his arms behind his back, thinning himself out like a needle. Instantly, his speed increased, and the air around his ears tightened like a violin string. 891 meters. 766 meters. 544 meters. 213 meters. The earth slowly filled his vision. Covering himself with his shadow, Liam held out his 4 arms to create an X shape, bracing himself for impact. end.O-VE/LBIN. Boom. The mushroom was indeed soft, but it had an uncomfortable consistency. As soon as Liam made contact with it, it softly met his collision, like a needle through rotten, wet dough. All kinds of soft, viscous liquids of dirty colors washed over him. Liam groaned as his descent came to a stop. A disgusting, putrid stench soured his nose. Liam groaned as he picked himself up and climbed out of the mushy insides of the mushroom. All kinds of slimes clung to his figure, pulling him down. Eventually, Liam climbed out, taking in a deep breath of air. I'm alive. That's good at least. Liam glanced towards the sky. The Imperialist hadn't noticed him, and she continued flying towards the cloud where Jax and the other elders were. Liam furrowed his brows. The stone slab was with Elder Jax. As long as they managed to succeed at the mission, Liam was fine surviving on his own. Liam took a deep breath and surveyed his surroundings. Dark. There was darkness everywhere. Right now, he was on the giant, rotten fungus that was growing out of the ground. It gave him a view similar to a 5-story building. And below, hundreds and hundreds of abominations. They had no fixed form. They were just lumps of flesh, some of which walked on legs, and others that slithered on the ground like snakes and slugs. They either had no eyes, or they had several. Deformed, unnatural limbs and decayed skin was a common theme among them. The sight was revolting. Liam was deep in thought when the mushroom he stood upon let out a soft squelch, as though it woke up from its slumber. Liam sighed, then clicked his tongue. Chapter 383 Disgust. Of course this would happen. Because why not? Clearly, he wasn't allowed a break. PSSSSSSSS. The giant mushroom suddenly excreted black and red gases from its head. Liam closed off all the pores from his body, including his ears, nose, and mouth. His eyes were protected too, a thin eyelid layer allowed him to see through them. He activated all the mental defenses he could. The gas enveloped him anyway, but there was no pain. Just a vague sense of unease that made him nauseous. Like he wanted to vomit. All kinds of disgusting images entered Liam's mind. It made him think he was drowning in a pool of feces, vomit and urine. Bile rose in his stomach and threatened to escape from his throat. Shing. Liam's swords appeared in his forearms. Dusk blades on his 2 lower hands. Breaker blade to his left. Black blade to his right. All 3 of them. Sword construct didn't actually hinder Liam's ability to take out all 3 of his swords whenever he wanted. It would just be a handicap if it did. Resisting the putrid, revolting feelings flashing through him, Liam blurred. Shying. 4 separate noises rang out as Liam's dusk blades, black blade and breaker blade started ripping through the mushroom. Darkness and hone were used simultaneously, digging into the mushroom's head and corroding it from within. Viscous slime spurted around him in an attempt to stop his charge, but failed to do so due to how fast Liam was. Like Liam imagined, the body he altered for himself was the embodiment of war ready. It was essentially 4 times the normal amount of damage he could inflict. More gas surged around him, like he'd caught on an ethereal fire. More images. Disgust. A knot tightened in his stomach. Liam felt like worms were crawling through his skin, digging into his eyes and oozing through his nose. Disgust. The fungus was doing its absolute best to try and remove the parasite devouring its flesh. But Liam continued slicing, ripping, butchering and severing through its circular head until it resembled a chewed-up piece of meat. With a quiet shriek, the mushroom tipped over and fell on the ground. Bang! Liam landed on the mushroom's head. The feelings of disgust were gone. He was normal now. He could breathe. Except, being here just felt wrong. Liam felt watched, and his thoughts were much more paranoid than normal. Not to mention, his skin tightened due to how bloody cold it was. Plus, the king's eye couldn't see too far out, but he could still see. At the same time, there were more crimson mushrooms like the one Liam had just killed. Though, he'd certainly landed on the biggest one of them all. Past the colonies, this is all there is, Liam thought. Abominations for as far as the eye could see. Liam's jade flickered on, and he answered it. I'm fine, Liam said before Jax could say anything. What about you and the rest, he asked. I'm glad, Jax responded with a quiet voice. Still hiding in the skies. We'll come for you as soon as we touch down on a colony. No need, Liam responded tersely. Just establish the world gate and I'll meet with you myself. Silence. Jax didn't expect such an answer. His priority was the safety of the Temple of Shadow's heir. The soon-to-be leader. Especially at a time like this. They needed to be a united front. Liam recognized the silence. I'll be fine. I need to study these things anyway. Contact me if you're in trouble. Reluctantly, Jax agreed. Then, they both cut off their connection. By then, the mushroom abomination Liam was standing on melted into goo. And the surrounding abominations took an interest in the scene. Specifically, Liam himself. They're all the equivalent of a peak rank 3 magical beast, Liam thought with a slight scoff as his blank gaze spread from one creature to another. Weak, then. Liam heaved a long sigh, then smiled. Avoiding a fight was easy. The abominations didn't have any particular speed-based abilities. Those that did weren't too powerful, and he could easily deal with them. But it had been some time since he'd gotten his hands dirty. Shing. Liam didn't waste a second and lurched forward, his blades ravaging through entire hordes of abominations. Black blood and grim viscera colored the air, and a trail of it soon formed as Liam continued, ripping, cleaving and slashing. On the way through, he'd store a couple of them in his ring. end.O/VE/LBIN. What followed was a brutal massacre that held no meaning other than to satisfy Liam's itch for bloodthirst. But then again, it wasn't like abominations were living creatures. Well, they might have been. But Liam could care less even if they were. It made no difference to him. Standing atop a hill of ravaged limbs, heads, skulls, and inhuman corpses, a cloaked, hooded figure heaved a long sigh. Liam had been killing nothing but abominations for the past week, carving his way downwards to a colony. There was just no end to them. Liam wasn't worried about being caught or leaving a trail of bodies behind. Any time he killed an abomination, other abominations would appear and devour their corpses, growing in strength. One thing Liam found out was that abominations weren't just monsters. Some, like the crimson mushroom and flesh spires, a self-explanatory name, provided homes for the abominations to live under. They had symbiotic relations with one another. Like Liam thought, even in chaos, there was order. Nevertheless, these weren't the important details. The most important thing of note was that Liam finally found a colony. It took a week of searching. The colony in question consisted of a giant dome that contained curved, faun-like structures inside of it. They were all more or less the same height. Each colony was bound to have a dozen or so zeniths inside them, but Liam couldn't tell where exactly they were. What's with these people and Gothic themes? Everything is either black or gray. Nevertheless, it was time to clean house. Chapter 384 Dead. The circular dome looked like it was a bubble, but it clearly didn't consist of water. It was made out of slime. Toxic slime. Usually, mermaids had control over that sort of thing, not fear imperialists, but what did Liam know? He'd seen a lot during the past week, and studying abominations hadn't bore fruit. They were too complicated and formless. And their anatomies were incredibly strange. It just looked like everything was mixed and matched together, and it somehow found a way to work. There wasn't any core or center of power in them either. Liam found that incredibly strange. Everything had a center of power. Even regular humans had their cores, which formed eventually, even if they had no cultivation base. The body was also a center of power, but in reality, it was just the vessel that contained everything. Afterward, Liam realized what it actually was. The entire abomination was a center of power on its own. These creatures, birthed from the Empress of Fear, in one way or the other, had no particular set of powers. Each one had a different purpose. Some had sinister eye abilities that made Liam feel like his insides were burning, just from a glance at them. Some had so many arms it put Liam to shame. Some were strong in other ways. The Whisperer, as Liam called them, were a type of abomination that murmured words of nonsense into Liam's ears. Eerie, sinister words of nonsense, such as how Liam felt when his mother died, and how he failed to enact revenge, and how Lloyd and Rogan died in vain, and how. Liam heaved a sigh. He had to be careful not to let his thoughts stray off for too long in this place. More often than not, he'd find himself thinking about dark memories, replaying them over and over in a trance until he finally snapped out of it. Mind warpers, Liam called them. Bastards were like fish. Any time Liam was near one, they'd sink into the ground and disappear. Nevertheless, the discovery that Liam made was that each and every one of these abominations were unique in their own right. Liam also used admit, but what came as a result wasn't anything special. It just made him look like ugly, and it didn't give him any special abilities of note. He tried it on a Whisperer and a Mind Warper, but he didn't obtain their powers. NO/V/L/BI/N. Liam looked at the colony once again. Colonies differed in size. The closest to the borders were the smallest, and they even contained a population of regular civilians. Those nearing the border of the Empire of Courage were the biggest and strongest, too. Liam took a deep breath and started taking slow steps forward, melting into shadows like a crocodile gliding through a body of water. Swimming through the sea of darkness was a neat way to counter the abominations. Granted, there were some pesky creatures that lived beneath the ground. Liam swam for 2 minutes before a parasite mole tried to dig into his spine. He twirled around with the black blade in hand, swinging in a wide arc that split the creature apart through the middle. It died where it stood. Parasite moles treated the ground as though it was water, and they targeted anything that passed by them. And when they died, they simply became one with the ground, turning into fossils. Liam swam for at least an hour, before reaching the toxic slime. Unfortunately, a hurdle appeared. He couldn't swim under. He had to walk straight through. Why? He sensed a powerful abomination beneath the ground. Something massive created violent ripples deep within the ground. Something long, judging by how the ripples moved. Should I go in anyway? Liam thought for a second. The toxic barrier might have some sort of alarm ability. Just then, a parasite mole swam through the toxic bubble barrier. Liam paid close attention. Obviously, he couldn't see it. He could just sense and hear, with his shifter sense and shadow sense. It continued forward for several seconds without being hindered. Silence. 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 A snap-like movement occurred within the sea of darkness that caused a powerful ripple to spread through the darkness. Silence again. No more parasite mole. Dead. Well, Liam had his answer. He'd have to walk straight through the toxic barrier. I'll just use an abomination as a meat shield, Liam thought, but then hesitated. What if it has the opposite effect? Clearly, it's meant to deter abominations from entering through. Liam didn't want to overthink. He found a secluded part of the dome, way out in the corner where the crescent-shaped structures weren't as jam-packed. Then, Liam emerged from the sea of darkness, empowering his body and covering himself with the redirection cloak. A moment later, he rammed through it, shoulder first. As Liam thought, it wasn't as gentle as a bubble. Except for the redirection cloak, Liam's inscribed clothing was melted apart, along with 3 inches of skin beneath. But he was through. Alive and pissed. There was no such alarm Liam imagined, just a barrier of pain no abomination could survive through. Except him, of course. Liam's blood surged through his veins and grew out the lost muscle mass. Wet squelching noises sounded from his wounds. It took 4 liters of his ichor to do so, but he'd rather not fight looking like melted ice cream. At the same time, the redirection cloak had become entirely white, which meant its redirection capabilities weren't as sharp. With that done, Liam spread his senses to find where the trouble was. Shadow sense, shifter sense, and mental energy all spread out to cover as much ground as possible. The place was teeming with all kinds of life. And uncharacteristically, the abominations here weren't as ugly and deformed. They were quite majestic, all things considered, and the fearful environment was not as dreadful. That would change. Liam pointed his index at the peak of a nearby building. A single sanguine string shot out from the tip of his finger at the speed of a bullet, eventually digging into the obsidian crescent-shaped building. No one noticed. Who would? A single sanguine string had the breadth of a hair strand. Then, the string crystallized, and Liam yanked on it. Whoosh! Chapter 385 League. Liam perched atop the fong like a hawk stalking out his prey. He had an eagle-eye's view of the entire dome. In front. To the left. To the right. The roads were like cobwebs, connecting one pathway to the other with no particular order. Imperialists, young and old, strong and pathetically weak, walked upon them. All women, all wearing Roman togas. The dome itself was lit up with an umbral, but natural light. Liam wasn't here just to slaughter and kill. That was one of the reasons. Another reason was finding out more about the war and why it was happening. Surely, a Zenith imperialist would know a thing or two about that. But, didn't that mean Liam would have to fight them? It did. But so what? Liam wasn't the same as before. He was in the big boy leagues now. He'd escaped the microcosm of power he was trapped in for so long. Now, it was time to push himself to the brink. Sacrifice a few limbs or 2. Out of the corner of his eye, Liam noticed a Zenith imperialist walking through the cobweb paths. Now I know why they're made like cobwebs. Liam thought. The imperialist rode on a massive, brown tarantula-type abomination, 13 meters wide and 4 meters tall. A similar species to compare it with could be the huntsman spider back on Earth. A simple glance could make any adult shiver and express disgust. 12 legs sprouted from their sides, covered with sharp, quill-like bristles. Under each hair was a slit. What were these slits? Beady black eyes that opened and closed. Hundreds of them. Besides the grim, scythe-like fangs protruding from its maw, the spider didn't have any distinct features. The tarantula continued until another imperialist, riding the same kind of spider, met it halfway. They struck up a conversation. Liam's eyes lit up. Perfect. Liam pointed his finger at another phone building, intent on getting into an earshot distance. Obviously, their mental energy range could definitely detect him. However, Liam didn't need to do that. He just needed to get a clear view of one of their eyes. Eventually, Liam managed to connect his king's eye to their mental spheres, and he could hear through their ears. "Ma's having nightmares again," said one of the zeniths, clearly dejected. "Brought back memories," she said. "That's the 4th time you've told me," the second one sighed. "You know if Leader Marisa finds out about your complaints, she'd take your head." "I know, can't help myself." "This has been going for too long," said the first, whispering hectically. "I just wish there was a point to this." "There is," the second said cryptically. "But we just don't know what." "Leave it at that." Before the first could ask more, the two parted ways. And that was that. They were just getting to the good part. Then again, Liam was incredibly lucky for them to speak of the war of all things. It wasn't often that one could find two goons that spoke of their boss' secret evil plan. As the two zeniths parted ways, Liam picked one out to ambush. The spider was a rank 4 abomination. And there was a rank 4 zenith on top of it. Even though they weren't the strongest physically, they couldn't be underestimated. For 2 hours, Liam simply hid amidst the buildings and tracked the imperialists' movements. "She takes the same route over and over again. From start to finish, there's a 16-minute window for me to lay a trap for her. But other paths consist of civilians. Can't risk getting caught. That path over there should be good enough. Gives me less time, but that's fine." Liam got to work. As soon as the woman passed through the specific path, Liam covered himself with his illusionistic abilities and made gestures in the air. Sanguine strings, specifically. Done with his work of art, he hid. Then, he just waited. It was time. The tarantula woman was here. Liam hid his presence with all the abilities at his disposal, then waited patiently for her to pass. Just as she rounded up the corner, she scowled deeply. A single red string glimmered with a dark sheen. She leaned forward, commanding her spider mount to reach out and touch it with a leg. Ting! Sanguine strings hidden above, below, and to the sides, shot out and converged at the imperialist. In a split second, the spider raised its legs. From its quill-like hairs, silver silk shot out in a protective, cage-like fashion, successfully defending against the abrupt attacks. But as the spider was preoccupied with the strings, Liam emerged from the ground, swinging in a wide, upward arc with his black blade. Shing! Black and red blood spread through the air. The first was of the abomination, split from middle to top, and the other was the imperialist. Unfortunately for Liam, she dodged at the last second. What should have taken away her head, sliced off just her shoulder instead as she evaded. Ethereal abominations burst out from the zenith's mental sphere. Wraiths with a ghostly lower body, but with vicious teeth. Almost instantaneously, they threw themselves onto Liam's mental sphere and began to chip away his mind. Immense pain. Unfortunately for the imperialist, Liam had 4 arms. Spinning around from the first upward arc, Liam fluidly transitioned to a horizontal swing with the breaker blade, brutally cleaving her apart from the torso with just one empowered swing. Shying! A sharp streak of entrails and blood flew from her side, a look of shock on her face. A moment later, Liam used hone and cut down the wraiths eating away at his mental sphere. In 3 to 4 moves, Liam had killed a zenith. Liam smiled. He was moving up in the world. But there was no time for self-amazement. There was still a bit of life in the zenith's eyes. But the chance to interrogate her was over. N-.O-VE/LBIN. She wouldn't give him anything. A moment later, she died. Thus, Liam just stored the tarantula abomination and her body. Then, he used darkness to wipe away all traces of blood. Next. Chapter 386 Control Room. After killing the first zenith, Liam followed after the other. N.O-VE/LBIN. These two were patrolling the outside of the colony. By extension, they were the weakest compared to all the others. I have to watch out for Marisa, whoever that is. The two zeniths were afraid of whoever that was, Liam thought. He continued for an hour straight, keeping away from sight and avoiding the areas with the highest population of civilians. Eventually, he caught up to the other woman. Sighing repeatedly, she had a downtrodden look in her blind eyes. With her head lowered, she obviously didn't expect a battle of any kind. "This'll be easier, then." Liam entered the sea of darkness and unsheathed his black blade. Then, brown corruption flared from his fingers and slowly spread across its edge. Corruption couldn't actually leave Liam's fingers. However, he could force it to stretch and extend. As long as Liam maintained contact between the corruption and whatever he was enveloping, it wouldn't break off. Doing this makes me use more of it, though. And there was a limit on how much corruption Liam had, anyway. Slowly, the woman was approaching. A moment prior, Liam swam into a Fong building closest to the road. She rounded the corner. Now. Time slowed. Liam pointed his finger at her neck as soon as she passed by. At the same time, Liam was using hone on a condensed chunk of mental energy, creating a precise slash invisible to the human eye. On his finger, blood condensed to a marble-sized droplet, which then exploded forward at incredible speed, paired with the honed slash. It was a sanguine string, except much more powerful. The imperialist didn't expect either. Boom! Her neck folded as the sanguine string rammed through it with incredible force. It wasn't enough to kill her. She was alive. But the honed slash found its way through her brain. On the outside, there was no visible wound. Not a droplet of blood. But within, a small patch of her sea of consciousness had been sliced off. But she was still alive. With quick thinking, the imperialist used an ethereal abomination to substitute for her sliced-off barrier. It acted like a bandage for her mind. Liam cursed. Instantly, her spider lurched towards the wall where the attack came from, the scythe-like fangs attempting to scissor it in half. Bang! The wall was clipped, sending chunks of obsidian flying everywhere. Liam was yanked out of the shadows due to the sudden attack. The imperialist was out of commission, probably repairing her mental sphere as much as she could. The spider was the only obstacle between the two of them, but it looked strong, looking at Liam with its 100 shadowy irises stored between its legs. It was stronger than the previous spider Liam fought. But if the zenith managed to get back into the fight, it'd get a whole lot harder to win. It dies, now. Thus, with a low growl, Liam charged in with all 4 blades, blurring into a streak intent on carving through the abomination. But the 100 eyes weren't for show. Despite using all the speed in his body, the spider perfectly tracked Liam's movements like he was going in slow motion. Liam couldn't even use his king's eye to connect with it, since he'd just be bombarded with different perspectives. Liam swung with all 4 blades to slice off a leg. He missed. The spider dodged. In one fluid motion, the spider's scythe fangs converged on Liam's waist. Cling! Liam used his dusk blades to hold the scythes off, but 2 fangs emerged from its chin, swiping upward through the cloak and digging into Liam's back. Liam activated obsidian skin. The fangs pierced right through, injecting a viscous yellow liquid into his back, liquefying his muscles. Pain shot through him. Pissed off, Liam jammed his black blade and breaker into the tarantula's face, then spread the blades outward, sending flesh and grime in all directions. Next, with the fangs still lodged into his back, Liam vaulted over the giant spider and found the Imperialist, sprawled over the ground and clutching her neck. It seemed like she couldn't scream. Having one's sea of consciousness cut out was much, much more painful than one can imagine. It made even thinking feel like death. Spotting Liam, she weakly raised her hand to command an abomination to attack him. A second later, her hand was gone. Severed. She wanted to scream. Liam sent her a glare. She still wanted to scream, but had no energy to. Liam's face was hard. Hard and annoyed and severely pissed off. "Where's Marisa?" Liam asked with dead eyes. Silence. Liam used piercing blade to poke into the sliced-off patch of mental sphere. The Imperialist grimaced in pain. But she still couldn't scream. One more time. "Marisa." "Where?" The Imperialist winced with pain. She just wanted relief. She couldn't even use the self-implosion abomination to sacrifice herself and attempt to kill Liam. Thus, she pointed towards a specific building past a cluster of fangs and teeth-like structures. Now that Liam took a closer look at it, there weren't any civilians surrounding it. Liam nodded at her. He swiped the Odachi across her neck, then proceeded to wipe out all traces of his stay. After killing 5 more Zeniths and interrogating them, Liam decided that it was enough. If I kill any more, they might get suspicious of the silence. There's only 3 Zeniths remaining. I haven't seen them switch up their posts, but they use Vulture's abominations to contact one another. They don't use Jade's, apparently. Liam glanced at Marisa's building. Through his methods of interrogation, Liam found out Marisa was in control of the colony. And whatever abomination was lurking beneath the ground. This made her dangerous. At the same time, he also found out there was a lockdown method for the toxic dome barrier. It wouldn't inform anyone outside of the colony, nor was it a rare occurrence. Most of the time, it was due to a strong abomination somehow piercing through the barrier. If that was the case, Liam could make sure no one escaped, and he could make all the noise he wanted. As long as he got to that so-called control room and activated the mechanism. Thus, Liam forced himself to rest for a few hours, before making a beeline towards the building. Chapter 387 Sandworm. Liam's eyes narrowed as he perched atop of the control building. It was slightly on the bigger side. 8 stories tall. The only entrance to such a building was at its foot. But no civilians of any kind were entering it. N0 Velben. All 3 Zeniths are inside. If the toxic barrier is anything like a formation, all I have to do is fiddle with the controls for a bit until I've figured out how it works. Liam could sense where the 3 Zeniths were. But in reality, he couldn't help but be a little worried. After all, there were 3 Zeniths inside this building. 3 Zeniths. Fighting them at the same time was incredibly dangerous. Very, very dangerous. But doable. Granted, he'd have to resolve himself to lose some liters of his blood. And maybe a few kilos of his flesh. Liam just had to be smart with what he could sacrifice. After a few minutes of overthinking, Liam merged together with the tower and swam downwards. He had become a shadow, slipping down each little crack and orifice to arrive at different rooms. Liam had to be slow. His shadow abilities were not invincible. They had limits. Mainly, wherever he passed by, it wouldn't go by unnoticed. Someone watching could see the shadows in that particular area ripple like water. Mental energy didn't pass through the shadows, but that didn't hinder vision in the least. Although there were just 3 Zeniths in the building, the number of normal Imperialists amounted to dozens. Liam avoided the rooms near the Zeniths. Avoiding a fight until he locked the place down was for the best, but there was a high chance the Zeniths were in control of the formation room. Wouldn't hurt to check, Liam thought. He emerged within an empty room, assessing it with scrutinizing eyes. It was well decorated, but that was it. A living room of some kind. Worthless. Liam repeated the process and ventured to all the other spaces, which were either toilets, living rooms, or bars, of all things. There was even a room dedicated for the abominations to live in. as though it was some sort of pet daycare. No formation room. Liam moved on to the rooms monitored by the low-ranking Fearists. Killing them required little to no effort. Liam's shadow clone spread beneath the sea of darkness. When a total of 4 Liams came together, it made killing easier than taking candy from a baby. At least, the weaker ones. Pretty soon, more than of the building were killed. Still no formation room. It was pretty clear that one of the rooms the Zeniths were guarding was the room Liam was looking for. Most likely, Marisa herself. But Liam didn't know which one was Marisa. Judging by size, it could be the one in the middle. But there was a chance that wasn't the case. In the first place, there was a chance that the formation Liam wanted to enable wasn't there. Unfortunately, all 3 rooms looked the exact same to Liam's eye. They all had some sort of container in the center of the room. And an imperialist was covering the door that led to it. One of them was reading a book. The other was cultivating. The third was training with an ethereal abomination. Some sort of mental training. Other than that, there wasn't anything out of place. Liam remained motionless for several seconds. This was not a small decision. Though, it was a bit dramatic. There was nothing special about someone picking out which room to attack. At the end of it, Liam picked the middle room to attack. With the Fearist reading a book. She's the laxest of them all. Probably since she's stronger than the other 2. Liam gripped the black blade tightly and steadied his feet right above the Zenith's room. The shadows within the room subtly rippled. Liam saw the woman's face. Fair skin. A sharp scar running across from her chin to left eye. Hardened blind eyes and a firm aura. When the shadows rippled, she furrowed her brows and looked up. Silence. As her sharp gaze went towards the shadows, Liam's eyes connected with the container in the center of the room. It was a glass tube filled with slime? Toxic slime. The same slime as the barrier. Alrighty then, Liam thought. Bang. Liam left the shadows with a massive kick to the ceiling. He burst into Marisa's room, ramming into the giant tube of slime with his shoulder. Boom. Splurg. Slime sprayed everywhere. Marisa's eyes widened with incredulousness, her jaw swung open in shock. Through the window on the other side of the room, Liam could see the toxic slime barrier crystallize. The imperialists within the colony looked utterly casual, and went on with their day. Liam looked towards Marisa, who had a severe grimace on her face. You have 1 second to explain who you are. Silence. 1. Marisa gestured upwards. The ground shook violently. Something was coming fast. Boom. Liam used all 4 of his swords to block the giant maw of what looked like a vicious sandworm. Clang. With the momentum and force that it emerged out of the ground with, it sent Liam flying through the tower's roof. Whoosh. Suddenly, he was twirling in the air. Liam's shoulder and elbow cracked a bit, making him grimace. A massive freaking sandworm. When it sent Liam shooting upwards, it made a U-shaped curve and vanished into the ground, leaving no visible mark on the earth. Liam steadied his body and managed to land on a Fong building before he fell flat on his face. Then, he fixed his footing. Marisa and her 2 comrades emerged from the ground and flew in the air above him. The other 2 were quite similar to her, only different in skin color and scar shape. Little squirt, Marisa said, her voice surprisingly deep for a woman. What do you think you just did? Suicide is much easier alone. Painless, too. Throwing yourself into a lion's den is too much, no? Liam smiled coldly. I'm not stuck in here with you. Liam's grip tightened around his blades. You're stuck in here with me. Chapter 388. A fish, a worm, a wyvern. 1 Liam. 3 Zeniths. Liam couldn't actually use all his abilities at the same time. That was foolish. He had to be smart about it. Most of Liam's fights ran the long course. They lasted for several minutes. Sacrificing his precious blood, albeit there were high quantities of it, could pose a threat to his regeneration. At the same time, Liam couldn't just use all his abilities to win a fight. It didn't work that way. end.ov/e/l/b/in. The closest analogy would be guns. Not every gun was used for the same situations. Grenades and rocket launchers were used on tanks or heavily armored vehicles. Sniper rifles were used at long range. Rifles were used in general combat. The same could be said for Liam's arsenal. Corruption was used against physically powerful enemies that needed to be incapacitated. Chaos was used against enemies that were too spell-based or too armored. Blood arts were much more useful in some situations than others. Void was better used when outnumbered or against a much more powerful enemy. Inscriptions were an exception to the rule, since they were used in almost any situation depending on what they were made for. But Liam had a feeling he might need to use everything here. Marisa threw her head back and laughed. "He has grit," said the woman to Marisa's left, grinning. "Short, slim and short-haired." Now, Erica," said the woman to Marisa's right. "Tall, slightly muscular, one-eyed." "Too early to judge." "Erica, Jane," Marisa said severely. "Don't play. End this fast." They shot their leader a short glance and saw the seriousness in her face. This was not a joke, they realized. Not if their leader wasn't laughing. Plus, despite outnumbering him, Marisa didn't order an immediate attack. He's dangerous, they both thought. 3 above. 1 down. Erica, the shorter Zenith, raised her middle finger. At first, Liam thought she was insulting him. But a sharp slithering noise echoed from her finger, which stretched incredibly long in a matter of seconds. It expanded, contracted, and grew into a vicious-looking abomination. Lusterless black scales covered its reptilian body. 4 arms grew out of its sides, 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom, each with a set of nasty, jagged but sharp claws. It had a rattlesnake's tail, and a draconic face. Liam assessed it. Rank 4 middle-tier abomination. Jane, the taller Zenith, summoned her own abomination. Her entire right arm squirmed and writhed, convulsing with wet sounds and slowly expanding in size. First, its body thinned out to a horizontal oval shape. Then, fish-like scales emerged from its body. Right after, 3 fins, 1 at the top, 1 at the bottom, and 1 at the back, burst out of it. Next, a giant pair of human hands emerged from its sides. They were not normal arms, fleshy, dripping with black ink and rotting. They were extremely muscular, most over-exaggerated. Each blocky hand was the size of a large boulder. It was a fish. A carp of some sort. With the arms of a titan. Liam didn't even know what to call it. Marisa's abomination was the giant sandworm. Definitely a peak rank 4 abomination. Erica and Jane's abominations were both middle tier. A draconic snake, sort of like a wyvern, and a fish with arms. Marisa smiled coldly. Jane smirked. Erica grinned. Liam took a deep breath. Inhale. Exhale. Silence. Boom. The sandworm was the first to rumble through the ground, swallowing the entire building Liam stood upon. Obviously, he dodged. The sandworm had incredible power. Too much power. But it lacked speed. Yet, as soon as Liam avoided the initial devouring attempt by the worm, a massive pair of fists came shooting down at him. Lurching backwards, Liam swung his breaker and dusk blades at the muscular arm as it shot past him, ripping out a chunk. Just then, the wyvern appeared behind Liam's back. Instead of a normal attack, it simply zoned him out from escaping, giving the fish a clear shot with its remaining fist. Boom. Liam tried blocking, but the sandworm was on his feet again. Just as the punch was about to hit his face, and the sandworm was about to clip him in half from below, tentacles emerged from Liam's cloak. They shot out to the building behind him, wrapping around its peak, then pulling him towards it. Whoosh! The punch shot past, missing him by an inch, causing his hair and cloak to flutter. Marisa furrowed her brows. What was this thing? But there were no breaks in battle. Just as Liam fixed his footing, the sandworm ravaged the building he stood upon. It was like a shark, waiting for a chance to pull Liam into its waters. Liam twirled around and pointed his finger to another structure, creating a sanguine string to pull on. Rush! Just as he did, a cluster of flames surged out of the wyvern's mouth, forcing him to change directions midair. But in front, the fish was already mid-swing, the giant fist taking up most of Liam's vision. Below, the sandworm burst from the ground with an open maw, like a whale attempting to swallow a bird. The inside of its circular mouth was like a death trap. Spikes of teeth everywhere. Above, the wyvern was making a beeline towards his head, like a falcon diving into the sea to seize a fish, jaw open. At the same time, ethereal abominations emerged from the three Zenith's minds, intent on shattering Liam's mental sphere. Time slowed. A large chunk of mental energy seeped through the cut on Liam's golden barrier. Mind edge. Liam's eyes constricted to a hair's breadth. Sounds grew muffled, distant. The world appeared crystal clear to Liam's eye, despite there being nothing but chaos surrounding him. Red sparks surged around Liam's hand and swirled to form a large sphere of chaos. Another large chunk of his mental energy compressed to a series of little wafer-thin arcs, each aiming at the ethereal abominations. 5 abyssal needles left Liam's ring and aimed upwards, activating instantly on Liam's command. Corruption gathered on Liam's dusk blades and prepared for the giant fist to make contact. Time resumed. Chapter 389 Cold. It happened all at once. Liam shot the giant ball of chaos downward. Shh. It shrieked as it entered the depths of the sandworm's circular mouth, lighting it as it fell all the way down. The abyssal needles were much, much faster. It had to be, after Liam made dozens of improvements to it. They hissed upwards through the air like streaks of umbral light, 2 of them slipping deep into the wyvern's mouth, while the other 3 aimed at its body. Then came the carp's turn. Tendrils emerged from Liam's back and curled around the punch, propelling Liam forward with all 4 blades in hand, ripping through flesh and carving a nasty trail of grime. Liam's corruption had unique properties, in the sense that he had to constantly maintain contact with it. He couldn't shoot it like chaos or manipulate it in special ways like darkness, but the least he could do was stretch and extend it. It worked like a charm. The plague-like substance spread like tree roots into the rotting muscles, rendering it useless and unhealable. Then, the chaos inside the sandworm's maw exploded with a stifled but loud boom, causing it to jolt, then spasm and convulse back into the ground. At the same time, the abyssal needles imploded and filled the wyvern's body with condensed dark smoke and noxious fumes. Due to that, its flight trajectory deviated, missing Liam by a few meters as it used its flames to clear away the noxious gas. Simultaneously, the arcs of mental energy that Liam had conjured shot out in precise lines, cleaving apart the ethereal abominations. All of it happened in the span of 4 seconds, and all at the same time. Like a stone skipping across a lake, Liam sprinted across the fish's rotten arm, slicing and dicing out entire chunks. Boom! His ripping and tearing came to an abrupt stop when the carp's remaining arm shot at him from the side, sending him flying as he blocked with all 4 swords. Whoosh! Crashing against a building, Liam groaned and used a sanguine string and his tentacles to redirect himself to safety. Looking at the 3 Zenith's expressions, they were clearly in shock. After all, that happened too fast. Even a Zenith wouldn't survive in such a difficult situation. Liam was backed into a corner from literally all sides. The sandworm, the carp, the wyvern, the mental abominations. And yet, in a sure-death situation, he survived. What the 3 didn't get was that this was a one-time ability. Using Mind Edge again was dangerous. Liam's mental energy was at 65%. Using Mind Edge took at least 30% away. If he used it again, his reflexes would not be as sharp, and the tides of battle would undoubtedly change. But it wasn't over. All 3, the fish, the wyvern, and the sandworm were still alive. The carp's right arm was dead. The wyvern expelled most of the toxic fumes Liam had tainted it with, but most of its arms had been corroded off. The sandworm was beneath the ground, but Liam could tell it was much slower compared to before. The injuries they sustained cut deep. The only thing Liam had successfully killed were the mental abominations, but they weren't rank 4. They were mere rank 3s used as a side attack. I need to get rid of the sandworm first. It was the most dangerous of them all. Followed by the wyvern and the carp. Every second they weren't engaging in battle, Liam's blood pumped out fresh ichor, and his wounds closed up. Their eyes narrowed as they saw Liam's inhuman regeneration. They couldn't let it continue. This time, the carp and the wyvern made a straight beeline towards Liam. The sandworm chased from beneath. A direct charge. Liam braced himself. Darkness veiled him momentarily, then formed 3 different clones, each identical to him. Marisa, Jane, and Erica simultaneously grimaced. They didn't know which one was Liam. To their blind eyes, they all looked the same. At once, all 4 versions of Liam split apart. But instead of running away, they charged straight ahead. Liam needed to end this fast. Due to the difference in numbers, playing cat and mouse would be helpful to the Imperialists, not him. Thanks to its long body, the wyvern rammed into 2 Liams at the same time, swallowing them. Clones. But upon a closer look, one could see a piece of corroded cloth holding together a brightly glowing red arm. Boom! A massive explosion shook the dome. The wyvern was down and out. But the carp remained. And there were 2 Liams left. A 50% chance of landing on the real one. The carp chose one at random. It flitted through the air, landing on one and smashing it to bits and pieces with its bare fist. A clone. Liam appeared behind its back, sticking an entire hand through its dense scales and injecting it with corruption. The ugly-looking fish let out a gurgle, then spasmed and gently fell to the earth like a leaf from a tree. But unexpectedly, it came to life for a brief second, landed a punch straight to Liam's face, cracking a few teeth and breaking a bone or 2, before finally dying. Liam was caught off guard. Blood sprayed everywhere. His vision swam. Just then, the giant sandworm beneath Liam's feet burst from the ground with unnatural speed. Liam's eyes widened. But the giant, circular maw had enveloped him, swallowing him whole, then snapping shut, before re-entering the ground. Marisa heaved a long sigh, sweat trickling down her face. NO/V//ELBIN. Erica and Jane also looked exhausted. Controlling abominations was no small thing. It severely strained the body and mind simultaneously. It was clear that neither of the 3 could continue for much longer. Just what was that thing? Erica asked, gasping for air. I've never seen an rumble. A cold feeling appeared in the 3 Imperialists' stomachs. Tremors ran across the ground. A moment later, the massive sandworm burst out of the earth, its stomach spasming wildly. Boom! With a flash of red energy, its insides exploded in a spray of blood and viscera. The 3 Imperialists were dumbstruck. Covered in blood and guts, missing one arm and several teeth, Liam emerged from the sandworm's torso, a bright purple mass in his hands. A moment later, he flicked it forward. Chapter 390 Bloodbath. As the 3 Imperialists watched incredulously, the arc of void spread out in a thin but wide arc. It was honed, splitting apart air, reality, and 3 zeniths in one stroke, and disappearing just as fast. It was done. They were too dumbstruck to know what was happening before their eyes. Granted, they began flying once they realized the sheer danger that radiated from the purple mass. But it was too late. Their lower halves decided to part ways with the upper, slowly separating with a wet squelch. A moment later, the cut the void had made needed to be restored. SSHHHHHHH. All 3 of them were smashed together briefly as the deleted matter reformed. They fell down like little birds shot down from the sky, each one smashing into the ground, barely alive. Liam landed above the sandworm's corpse, greedily gasping for air with his head to the sky, teeth broken, chipped and stained with several shades of blood. Boiling hot steam puffed out with each long breath, pumped through a set of burning lungs. His cloak was fully white, with the hood covering the top of his head. The zeniths lay at his feet. Brutalized and broken, limbs crushed and bodies dismembered. He stood above their bodies, dreadfully terrifying in his own right. Horrified, wide-eyed spectators were watching with jaws swung wide open. The battle wasn't gentle or quiet at all. They were civilians and cultivators, watching their leaders and protective forces get beaten down by a four-armed animal. It was obvious this was an abomination. The worst kind. Slowly, Liam's breathing steadied. His gaze was still aimed at the sky. Laughter. Liam threw his head back and laughed. 3 zeniths. He'd killed 3 zeniths by himself. Who could boast of such an achievement? Not many. Maybe none at all. Sure, he'd sacrificed an arm, most of his teeth, some bones, 8 fingers and more than 75% of his blood. So? He'd get it all back. For now, he reveled in this moment. This was a milestone in his journey, one he wouldn't forget. A long silence. Slowly, his breathing returned to a calm rhythm. Enough reveling. Liam slowly lowered his gaze, noticing the thousands of horrified civilians still looking at him like some sort of escaped lion from a zoo. The cultivators among them didn't look confident in the least. Their strongest died. What hope did they have? Still, that didn't mean they'd accept getting killed without a fight. But their legs trembled and their confidence was non-existent. Not to mention, with each minute that passed, Liam's terrible wounds slowly closed up and healed. But even in this horribly weakened state, they didn't attack. Still more to kill, Liam thought, spitting out a few loose teeth. I'm a mess. Then, he quickly grabbed the upper half of Erica's body, clutching her head above his mouth. KRSH. Gulp. 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 A long stream of blood poured straight through Liam's throat, invigorating him from within. Liam let out a satisfied sigh. That's better. I'll have to interrogate Marisa, though. She's still alive. Liam glanced back at the gawking crowd. You can start running now, Liam said to them, heaving another sigh as he took slow steps towards them. It ends the same, though. Silence. As the Odachi hissed through the air, screams rang out. It was a bloodbath. Once, the toxic dome acted as a shield from the outside, protecting the colony from cruel and powerful abominations. Now, it was a cage to stop anything from escaping. Anything. And soon enough, everything within the dome had been exterminated. No survivors whatsoever. Liam made a passable effort at cleaning the place up. By now, he devoured most of the bodies in 4 or 5 bites, stuffing them down his stomach to regain his strength. Quite honestly, Liam had never pictured himself as a monster. But seeing a 3-armed creature seizing an old woman and shoving her into his mouth was sort of terrifying. At the end of the massacre, he went back to Marisa. She was laying with her back to a phone building, her eyes drooping with exhaustion, her body limp. Liam used transfiguration on Marisa's body to stop her from passing out from blood loss. The lower half of her body was a crude stump, a padding of skin and flesh to stop her entrails from pouring out. Since Liam's blood had arrived at the upper tier, his transfiguration had gotten much better at transforming things other than himself. Not enough to cause significant or rapid amounts of damage. Plus, it wasn't good for battle. But for healing wounds and keeping people alive, it was a decent addition to have. When using transfiguration on other people, Liam called it disfiguration. Marisa looked up at Liam with a weak gaze, who stared at her as though she was a bug. Quite frankly, Liam didn't know if she would give him anything. Probably wouldn't. But it didn't matter. Liam had the king's eye, after all. Depending on his answer, her mental waves will falter and move. Once, reading a zenith's thoughts was extremely difficult. N-0 Veld 1N. But now, Thanks to how far he'd come with the psionic rune, and how weakened Marisa was, her mind was much easier to snoop into. Tell me about the closest, weakest colony from here, Liam said, careful not to ask too many questions back to back. That would change topics too fast, and her mind would become a mishmash of different thoughts. As soon as Liam asked that, a thought appeared in Marisa's mental sphere. Liam hid a smile from his face. Further south. The flea demon colony. In reality, her mouth moved to voice a vicious curse at him. Who's your superior? Liam asked. Silence. A name appeared in Marisa's thoughts. Nuran. Dangerous, from what she thinks about her, Liam thought pensively. Best avoid her for now. Once more, Marisa cursed at him. Know anything about the war? Liam asked one last time. Why it's happening? Silence. Liam's eyes narrowed. Marisa didn't know much. Nothing too detailed. The war was happening at the line, where the Empire's lands met. But this battle wasn't over an argument. It was over something. Chapter 391 Touch of Anarchy. Liam nodded to himself. These low-ranking goons don't know much. Marisa wasn't going to give anything more up. Suddenly, she laughed. Good luck leaving this place, Marisa said with a weak, mocking laugh. You've broken one of the slime tubes. Liam looked at her with dead eyes. There's 3, she continued with a spiteful tone, speaking in between coughs and wheezes. As soon as you break it again, those flying with the cloud leeches will notice how ravaged this place is. Then, they'll hunt you like a flesh dog. Liam pursed his lips. But there's a 3rd tube, is there not? Liam said. It'll harden the dome once more, won't it? Marisa laughed with a rasp. Then you'll be trapped here, genius. Liam smiled coldly. No, I won't. You'll share this graveyard with your people, though. The talk was over. Liam picked her up using 3 arms. Crack. Then popped her skull like a grape over his mouth. Crunch. Crunch. Gulp. Crunch. Crunch. Even the bones weren't spared, crushed to dust beneath his sturdy molars. He just couldn't be bothered separating meat and bone. Tastes better with a crunch anyways, Liam thought. After satisfying his hunger, with all the bodies he'd just killed, Liam decided it was a good time to contact Jax. The goal here was simple. Through treading in between weaker colonies, Liam and the elders would create a path towards the line. That way, the vampires and incoming acolytes would have a much easier job at catching up with their work. Plus, they could spread out like a disease, getting rid of the colonies by dividing their forces. The dual empire wasn't small. It was huge. Especially the so-called mega colony, which the Empress herself lived in. But obviously, they couldn't hope to venture into those lands. That was for the allies and the powerhouses to do. Taking out the jade, Liam imbued it with aura, then waited. Silence. A few teeth are already growing, Liam thought with a toothless smile. After 4 seconds, the jade flickered on. Are you safe? Jax's voice rang out from the other side. I called you so many times. What happened? Sorry, I was being ripped apart in a giant sandworm's death trap of a mouth, Liam thought, but what he said was. Nothing, I've finished up with a colony. Have you put down the world gate already? Silence. Finishing up a colony? Behind the jade, Jax's eyes widened as much as they could. Liam wasn't one to lie or boast, which made that comment even more surreal. But Jax didn't say his compliments, limiting himself to a proud smile. There were more pressing matters. We've run into a bit of a problem, Jax said with a hesitant tone. Liam furrowed his brows. What, exactly? You know how Alucard said the world gate needed a stone surface? Jax asked. Yeah, Liam said, furrowing his brows. Well, it doesn't work for anything other than stone. And there's no stone inside any of these colonies except one. Silence. Liam scowled. That was true. Most of the structures and buildings were made out of a glimmering, obsidian-like material. But what kind of stupid rule was that? What was the point of an ultra-powerful gate that connected two different countries together, if it had such a stupid weakness? Then again, everything had its kryptonite. But why is that a problem? Liam asked, referring to the colony. Just enter together and wipe it out. Jax coughed awkwardly. Not that simple. It's the trapped reality colony. They're basically illusionists of some sort. We're outside its vicinity, but it's dangerous. Ian tried getting past the black barrier, and he's been in a coma ever since. Liam frowned. Ian was another elder that came along. He was a shifty fellow, but kind-hearted and brave. Jax's tone got heavy. He looks like he's in a nightmare of some kind. Keeps twitching and convulsing in his sleep. Have you tried waking him up? Liam asked, knowing it wasn't the most sensitive thing to say. Jax sighed heavily. We have. He's not waking up. Something's inside his mental sphere, and we can't take it out. Liam clicked his tongue. Indeed, that sounded difficult. Each colony was different from one another. Essentially, they all had different ways to manifest their fear. This colony in particular had a mix of everything, but was physical and spell-based in nature. The flea demon colony fought with, well, fleas. At least, Liam thought they did. He hadn't been there himself, of course. It was obvious what a colony with the name Trapped Reality did. And it was a bit terrifying to know it could affect Zeniths like that. There was a pregnant pause. By any chance, do you have the colony leader's name? One of them said, what was it again? Nov, LB/N. Elder Jane's distant voice came from the background. Nuran. Oh, right, Jax said. Nuran. Liam clicked his tongue. Maurice's superior. Who she also feared, Liam thought. My luck is amazing, as always. I'll make my way there. Maybe I can figure something out. Tell me your coordinates, Liam said firmly. Jax described the landmarks and different colonies they went through before finding the Trapped Reality colony. Until then. Stay safe. The jade flickered off. Liam heaved a long sigh. By then, his wounds had healed, and his arm was back. That fast. But there was a simple reason. It was because of the sheer amount of people he'd eaten, giving him the blood required to reform most of his muscles. Liam made his way towards the original building with the slime tubes. Then, he located the two rooms. For the first, he simply bashed it with a fist. KRSH. It exploded with viscous liquids. Then, Liam made his way towards the third tube of slime. Instead of breaking it, Liam laid his palm on its surface. Chaos gathered on his finger. But it didn't explode. It was tame. Liam touched its surface with the chaos-covered finger, then pulled back. The chaos remained. This was Liam's rank 3 spell. Touch of Anarchy. Chapter 392 Fleas. Touch of Anarchy was the rank 3 spell Liam had made. The spell was something Liam was honestly proud of. It momentarily subdued the volatile nature of his chaos, allowing him to plant it on any surface he wanted. It didn't make chaos stronger in a sense. It just gave Liam more control over it. It was made through the combination of controlled chaos and focused havoc. Even though Liam made it a while back, he hadn't used it too many times. In fact, the only time he did was when he was inside the sandworm's giant mouth. The reason? Because it only worked in some situations, and the spell actually used more chaos than normal, despite not increasing its strength in any way. Liam used just a finger-sized amount of chaos at the base of the tube, which stuck to it like gum. It crackled quietly, itching to explode, but Liam didn't allow it to. As soon as it left his finger, Liam bolted towards the toxic slime barrier. He turned into a streak, webbing himself across the buildings using his sanguine strings. In 2.5 minutes, he made his way to the toxic slime barrier. Liam groaned. Then, empowering his body, he burst through from the wall of slime. It took 30 seconds from him to wriggle himself out, gobs of flesh melting from his form. But by the end of it, he grinned, glancing back at the building with the slime tube inside. Liam snapped his fingers. Boom. A loud boom echoed from the slime tube building, sending bits and pieces of obsidian rubble flying everywhere. A moment later, the toxic barrier crystallized once more, turning translucent and foggy. Liam smiled. The gesture he chose for the activation of the spell was a finger snap. Why? Because it looked good. With that, Liam bolted towards the coordinates Jax had given him. They weren't too far away, and there wasn't any particular time limit Liam had to abide by. I'll stop by the flea demon colony first, Liam thought with a slight smile. Killing 3 zeniths at the same time gave him higher goals. But it wasn't like Liam had much of a choice. There were colonies he had to go through in the first place. A few days of travel passed. Liam continued on the incline downwards, heading deeper and deeper in. If there wasn't that pesky darkness hindering his vision, Liam would have spotted wherever the Empress lived by now, and all the other colonies. But unless he got close, he couldn't see much. Liam passed by several colonies that he didn't fight against. They were off course, and some were heavily populated compared to the others. As he continued swimming beneath the shadows, Liam studied the state of his body. Eating so many people at once gave him a boost in all centers of power. Mainly his body and core. I'll reach the upper tier of rank 4 soon. And the solid stage of rank 3, 2, no/1b, in. But, most important of all, was Liam's sea of consciousness. Liam had become a rank 3 magus when he was 17.5 years old. And now, he was 22. 5 years. He'd been a rank 3 magus for quite some time now. I feel like I'm close. If I dedicate some time to it, maybe I can push past the 3rd rank. But becoming a rank 4 magus wasn't easy, and the self-tribulation that came with it was perhaps the hardest. Not here, though, Liam thought with a slight scowl. Taking the self-tribulation made the cultivator go unconscious and completely defenseless. Doing so behind enemy lines, especially in this place, was a death sentence. Once this is over, then. Eventually, Liam arrived at the flea demon colony, which was way smaller than he thought. Its barrier was, well, made out of fleas, buzzing loudly and repelling any monster that thought of coming close. Fleas with fangs. Human-sized fleas. Fleas with bright sapphire eyes, mantis-like blade arms and crude fangs protruding from their sides. Shing. Liam took out his swords and sank into the shadows. No flashy stuff, Liam thought seriously. In and out. In the once lively flea demon colony, there were abomination and human corpses everywhere. In Liam's hands was a zenith's ripped-apart body, which he stuffed down his throat a moment later. Bite marks and fangs were still lodged in Liam's back and arms. The colony was weaker than Liam thought. There were only 3 zeniths there as a whole, and barely any civilians. Who would want to live in a city made of fleas? Not Liam. He killed off the 2 zeniths silently, and their abominations shortly after. Of course, Liam tried to interrogate the 2, but they'd self-imploded themselves. The 3rd didn't give anything up either. Liam shook his head, then left after devouring everyone's bodies. At least, what remained of them. A few more days of travel passed. Now, wherever Liam ran, there was a noticeable incline downwards. Not as much as walking down a hill, but a barely noticeable ramp. Finally, Liam spotted a massive, black bubble, surrounded by a chain of obsidian mountains protruding with palisade spikes. The trapped reality colony. Liam hid himself beneath a small cavern, between some disgusting plants and flesh-like trees. He tried calling Jax or Virium, but more than 3 dozen shadowy puddles formed beneath his feet. Finally, Virium said with a slight smirk, giving Liam a firm, fatherly squeeze on the shoulder. Took you long enough. Jax gave him a smiling nod. Jane wanted to pull him into a tight hug, but the smell caused her to pull back and grimace a bit. You stink, Aki said loudly, a condensed stream of water appearing in your hands. Care for a bath? Judging by all the elders' sour faces, the smell was indeed putrid. Liam sighed. Fine. Splush. The jet stream of cold water smacked away all his impurities, top to bottom. With the filth and grime off of him, the time for pleasantries was over. Show me Ian. Chapter 393 Thin. A female elder appeared from the back with Ian in her arms. She had long orange hair and large blue eyes, rimmed with dark circles and currently filled with sadness. Ian's wife, Aor. Ian was still spasming and groaning in his sleep, unable to scream or open his eyes. Aor gently placed her husband down in front of Liam, then looked at him pleadingly. Please, save him, she muttered weakly. Liam didn't respond. There was a high chance whatever Ian was infected with had already burrowed deep within his head. His mental waves are all messed up, tainted black and blue, and it's getting worse. Why'd he go in without any protection of any kind? Liam asked with furrowed brows. Silence. Most faces grew angry. Other faces grew a bit ashamed. No/1b, in. One or two faces looked guilty. Darius was the first to speak. Johan and Neri were playing a game of dare or dare with him. Ian lost. And these two dared him to go through the barrier alone, and without telling anyone. Liam sent a chilling glare to the two elders in question. Johan was a short, black-haired, red-eyed, skinny fellow that seemed to have problems with authority. And Neri was his taller, more muscular brother of similar features. Both had achieved zenith status recently, and were particularly proud of their newfound power. They already looked pretty beat up, judging by their swelling lips and bruised faces. It wasn't enough. A lot rested on this mission. And ruling with kindness was not Liam's way. When this is done, Liam said darkly to the two. You both owe me one hand each. Then, Liam glanced at Ian's sleeping body. And so does he. Shocked, Aor wanted to protest, but Jane put a hand on her back, shaking her head. Liam had given them orders, and they'd pissed all over it, defying his authority. Johan and Naren looked just as shocked and enraged, but they didn't dare speak out loud. Not with so many glares daring them to. Nevertheless, it wasn't the time to throw around blame. Truth be told, this entire situation was unnecessary. If it was up to Liam, he'd have Ian sent back to Alali and have someone else take care of him. But letting a clan member die in front of everyone was not good. If they disobey a direct order after this, I'll let them die. Instead, Liam carefully assessed Ian's mental sphere, attempting to identify whatever had dug into his consciousness. He held open Ian's eyelid and used his king's eye to peer into his mental sphere. In reality, Liam could choose between accessing their vision versus just peering into their mental spheres. Currently, he didn't want to risk being hit by whatever was hijacking Ian's brain. As soon as the king's eye connected to Ian's head, Liam saw just how dark and muddled the inside of his head was. It was clouded with black mist, and the waters of Ian's mind sea was murkier than a swamp. Liam pursed his lips and looked for the abomination. Everything has a source, Liam thought with a focused face. His vision continued past the murky waters, searching. There. A tiny little tick. Liam saw it latching onto Ian's mind barrier, spreading dirty fumes throughout the waters and taking nibble-sized bites from the transparent barrier. It has to die, Liam thought. It's killing him. Mental energy gathered around Liam's hand. A needle-sized length. Using hone, he sharpened it. The zeniths were watching with wide eyes. Aor wanted to stop whatever Liam was doing, but Jack sent her a soft glare. Liam put the honed slash near Ian's head. Hold him down, Liam said to Jax, Ryu, and Virium. Cover his mouth in case he screams. Aor had to look away. Pills that reform the mental barrier? Liam asked Jane. Jane nodded, taking out a large brown pill. Just one. Thickens it. The three pinned them down together, and in one swift movement, Liam stuck the honed slash into Ian's mind. It went straight through and poked a hole through the man's head, killing the tick instantly. Spasms spread across Ian's figure, and a stifled cry echoed from his mouth. But Jane shoved the pill down Ian's throat, forcing him to swallow. A moment later, he simply lost consciousness. Ryu, Diriam and Jack slowly rose their feet, and Aor rushed to inspect her husband's figure. He was alive. Tears welled in her eyes, and some of Ian's closest friends heaved a relieved sigh. Thank you so much. Aor muttered repeatedly at Liam, who looked unfazed by her gratitude. Saving a life was a funny contrast with how many he'd taken. Slowly, Ian's eyes flickered open, groaning painfully. Aor helped him sit up. Am I dead? Ian asked as he looked around. A few laughs resounded within the group. No, but you owe a hand, Liam said. Ian's face fell. Before Ian could say anything, Liam cut him off. What did you see in your dreams? Ian winced, as though remembering a bitter memory. He glanced at Aor. My worst nightmare. Something dreadful, something I'd kill myself over if it happened in reality. It felt like I'd been stuck there for entire months, Ian said, holding his face. Liam furrowed his brows. Did you keep track of time? He asked. Yeah. How much time do you think passed? Liam asked. Ian grimaced. 3 months and 4 days. This time, Liam grimaced. And so did everyone else. This meant one thing. Time spent inside the nightmare is way faster. A time dilation of some kind. A grim realization, which made the trapped reality colony that much more dangerous. You and him can stay behind, Liam ordered suddenly, before leaving the cave with all the figureheads of the temple. Everyone's gazes were fixed towards the dark barrier. How do you suggest we go through? Ryu said with a slight frown. I don't want to be stuck reliving my worst fears. And what might that be? Aki said with a curious face. Silence. Becoming thin again. Chapter 394 Suckers. Liam shook his head. We can swim under, Jane suggested. Novel B.1n. Orisa can create an isolation barrier to keep it under wraps. The color is pretty much the same, so I doubt people know the difference. Orisa nodded silently. She wasn't the talkative type, preferring to follow orders gracefully. A pause. Good enough, Liam said. We'll settle for that. As a group, everyone merged with the shadows. Then, they swam forward beneath the colony, gliding under like a pack of crocodiles. Thankfully, there wasn't anything living beneath the barrier. The environment Liam no longer housed abominations that swam beneath the ground. They could safely swim forward with no hindrance. Eventually, though, they'd entered through. Shifting his focus above, Liam could sense the shadowy silhouettes of each building, along with the crowds of people that passed through them. So full of life. The buildings themselves were shaped after various insects. Ticks, cockroaches, bedbugs, silverfish. A nightmare for anyone who squirmed at the sight of them. At the same time, the colony was much bigger than normal. Roughly 6 times the size of the first colony Liam took down, and 9 times bigger than the flea demon colony. The paths between them were much more spacious, hence giving the group better ways to spread apart and take them out piece by piece. The number of zeniths was also much higher. Much higher. 32, exactly. And they were all well connected to each other with the usage of a particular insect. The horsefly. Horseflies were incredibly fast. On Earth, they could average speeds of 144 kilometers per hour. Except, this was an abomination. They were barely the size of a fist, but they were literally covered with wings. All kinds of them, small and big. They resembled little bullets shooting from across the sky, leaving no trail of their flight except a gust of fast wind. In the center of this place, Liam noticed a giant, stone-made building. It was the statue of a tick, antennae to the sky, arms spread wide. It was massive, nearly 12 stories tall. The back of the tick, its shield, was crawling with all sorts of insects and critters. Not as charming as it looks. What's with these people and their architecture? Liam thought with a bit of disgust. We'll spread, Liam said to the group. Since I can see the fear ticks, I'll go to Nuran's building. Ryu, Orisa, Darius and Jax, come with me. Don't do anything until the barrier is up. They firmly exchanged nods. At once, the 36 zeniths scattered like marbles in all directions, each heading to a different sector of the colony. Liam giving orders was no longer strange. His authority was not questioned. Not even as he commanded more than 30 zeniths at once. As Liam's group approached the tick building, they couldn't help but feel a sense of unease and dread. As though all kinds of bugs and critters crawled up and down their spines, through their bodies, out their ears, up their nose. Out of everyone, Orisa had a disgusted, nauseous look. Everyone else looked relatively unbothered, though. Quietly, they glided across the tick's large, circular shield. Liam heard the chirps, crickets and clicks of all the insects mixing together in a morbid cacophony. Liam could sense where Nuran was. The massive tick's eyes were actually hollow, circular rooms of some kind. The right one is empty, Liam thought. She's on the left. Ryu, Darius and Jax followed Liam as he swam over the circular orb. On the other hand, Orisa climbed the antennae at the top of the tick's head, preparing her isolation barrier. They waited patiently as Orisa made a series of gestures in the air. Silence. 2 minutes passed. With shadows in her palms, Orisa clasped her hands together. Then, she separated them. The more she spread her hands, the more it revealed a circular bubble. An isolation barrier. Yusin had given tips and important lessons to all the elders of the temple, and Orisa's specialization was formations. And now, calling her an expert wasn't too far off. As soon as the bubble left her hands, it spread outward like a silent, harmless shockwave, up until it covered the colony barrier like a second layer. Smiles spread across the group's faces, while confusion and a ramping vigilance spread across the imperialists. It wasn't Liam's job to deal with those. Instead, as soon as the isolation barrier was put up, he and all the others with him phased through Nuran's room. Time slowed as they emerged. Liam saw Nuran standing over by the curved wall, which was see-through, a glass filled with red liquid in her hands. She had long, braided white hair. A lanky, thin frame that looked way too skinny to be considered normal. As soon as they burst from her ceiling, she snapped around and assessed her intruders. Then, something unexpected happened. She started screaming from the top of her lungs. In fear, Ryu and Jax easily pinned her down with physical strength alone, cracking her knees, while Liam prepared a slash of honed mental energy in case she had any ideas. Darius had covered the place in a water sphere, blocking out any noises. She still continued screaming. But no one on the outside could hear them. Liam felt something cold rise in his stomach. Something felt off. Why was she the one screaming? Wasn't she Marisa's superior? Marisa was pretty strong herself. Liam furrowed his brows deeply. He leaned forward towards the terrified woman, piercing her with his stare. Her screams came to a stop, but her shivering and whimpering didn't. I thought you said this Nuran woman was strong or something, Ryu said, still denying her movement. I feel a bit bad. The woman gasped, then spoke frantically. Wait. I'm not Nuran. I'm just a cleaner. Silence. A zenith cleaner? Lies. The group grimaced. Then who? The water sphere burst apart, and a tick the combined height of 2 humans exploded through the point of impact. It had beady black eyes and long antennae twitching left and right on its head. A massive shield covered its back. It was huge. An abomination. An intelligent abomination, judging by how it shrieked out a comprehensive sentence. You chose the wrong tick to mess with, suckers. Ticks gushed from its body like swarms of filthy mist, which swarmed the group. Chapter 395 Explosion. Liam had no clue what he was seeing. A talking abomination. It was huge. Bigger, taller, and meaner looking than Ryu. And it spoke to them. This wasn't a normal creature by any means, and all of Liam's guards were up. A small voice in the back of his head told him it was a rank 5, but he couldn't be sure. As soon as the swarms of ticks gushed through the abomination's body like mist, Liam's response came instantly. Ryu, Darius and Jax were incredulous, but ready to act. Everyone converged to where Liam was. A shrieking, crackling noise resounded in Liam's hand as chaos surged from his body. Boom! Liam threw his sphere of chaos towards the swarm of ticks and bugs, aiming close to the wall. The filthy mist of insects recoiled instantly, with a huge cluster of them dying on the spot. At the same time, the wall burst apart, creating an escape from the confined space. Fire surged and roared as it reached Jax's hand, forming a blazing spear. A stream of condensed water gathered at Darius's feet, propelling him through the gate. Ryu raised a clawed hand, and a large, earth-made claw-like structure burst from the stone. Liam shot towards the opening he made, and his group followed closely while shooting attacks at the massive tick. Whoosh! The fall from a 12-story building wasn't low at all. But not a while back, Liam had fallen from the clouds. This was nothing. And, well, Darius, Jax, Ryu, and Arisa could fly. They pulled him along as though he was some sort of bag, before they gently landed on a patch of flat ground. It looked to be some playground of sorts, made with harmless, cute abominations. As they landed, they were all crushed and turned to mush. Now, the view was strange. The tick abomination looked at them from 12 stories above, his gaze strangely cold and human, and definitely pissed off. The entire colony had sprung into chaos. Explosions and deafening booms resounded from the north, east, west and south sides of the colony. The fire elementalists filled the colony with explosive colors. The wind elementalists sent gusts of sharp wind in all directions. The earth elementalists caused tremors to spread across the ground. The water elementalists drowned larger abominations. And inscriptions were also being used. Mainly abyssal needles, since it was the temple's fan-favorite inscribed item. That, and parasite worms. Here and there, streams and floods were beginning to gush from individual battlefields. Buildings were being ravaged. Abominations produced the eeriest, most disgusting cries known to man. An array of colors filled the isolation barrier, paired with gunshot-like sounds. And yet, none of that concerned the main group. The tick still looked at the 5 as though they were the insect, not it. That has to be the ugliest, most disgusting thing I've ever seen, Ryu snarled, making a vomiting movement with his mouth. Nuran, the human-sized tick, chirped in loud intervals. Mocking laughter, it seemed like, judging by the familiar rhythm. Never thought abominations were capable of human speech, Liam thought. Is it a human? No. No, it's not. I can sense only its body and earthly element. Abominations had their own element. But as Liam found out, their entire being was a center of power. Elements weren't restricted to cores. Liam's Chaos Pearl was a perfect example of that. It has no mental energy, either. So it's definitely not human. It's just an intelligent abomination. Suddenly, the tick jumped down. Boom! And dramatically landed on the ground, like some sort of morbid superhero. Then, it raised its head. It smiled. Phoo! Instantly, a cluster of disgusting bugs formed a massive, living hive around the tick, producing a loud droning sound. BBZZZZZZZZZZ. At the same time, the horseflies stopped shooting overboard. They stopped mid-air, slowly turning towards Liam and his group. They resembled black snowflakes, covering the sky. Liam let out a long groan of annoyance. This was so unfair. Meanwhile, the hive of insects created solid tendrils around the abomination. Then, it shot forward. Jax didn't wait for it to continue, spreading his arms and forming flaming spears that streaked the air. N-0 Rush! Orisa was charging a wind attack of some kind, pulling back her hands as though she was cocking an invisible bow. FFFFFF. Loud popping sounds echoed from Ryu's muscular body, but instead of growing bigger, his muscles simply grew stronger. Darius began charging the rank 5 water spear spell he'd used against the iron giant. Shh. Water converged in the sky. The two forces connected. An unreal shockwave spread from the point of impact, instantly obliterating a few buildings in the vicinity. Just as the series of spells connected with each other, the tendrils of bugs exploded too. Yeah, Liam thought with a grimace as he twirled through the air like a yo-yo. He's definitely in the 5th rank. There were several indications of Liam's assessment. Abominations usually had one area of speciality. They could only really do one thing. But not only could this thing talk like a human, it could also change the functionality of its attacks. But still, Liam wasn't too worried. An abomination was just one center of power. It was the equivalent of having a rank 5 body, but a rank 1 core and sea of consciousness. Someone like that could easily be defeated by even a rank 3 cultivator. Liam wasn't underestimating it, but he wasn't overestimating it either. Liam firmed his body and landed on the surface of a flea-shaped building. Bang! Then, he pushed himself off, ricocheting like a bullet back to the tick. Liam glanced at the 4 zeniths, and they glanced back. An understanding formed between them. Make me a path. Shh. Liam's rank 2 spell, Chaotic World, crackled in his hand. 50% of his chaos was used instantly. Tendrils of the hive were about to wrap around him and crush his limbs, but the 4 zeniths used their elements to create a tunnel for Liam to pass through. As soon as he reached the abomination, Liam kicked the sphere of chaos towards it. The abomination's hard face twisted as the hive converged in front of it. A protective wall of sorts against the boom. Explosion. Chapter 396 King. Darius woke up with a long, raspy groan. His head felt like it had been stuffed down a vice. Like someone had taken a nail and screwed it in his brain, then twisted as much as they could. As soon as his gaze stabilized, a well-decorated room met his squinted gaze. Bright walls. Clean. Unmarked and newly painted. His bed, an actual bed, was perfectly ironed, even as he awoke. Strange. Darius racked his head, but his memories were hazy. Like he'd awoken from a long dream, except he had no recollection of what it was about. He sat up, lingering there for a bit, a pensive look on his ashen face. Something's wrong. Darius squinted his eyes, trying to delve deeper into his head. What was he forgetting? What was he? The door opened, and a woman with lustrous, auburn hair and bright almond eyes held the handle. "Morning, sweetie," she said with a slight smile. "Sleep well?" Silence. Darius looked at her with squinted eyes. This was his mother. This was Eve? Eve. Something's wrong. Darius scratched his head, silent, squinting his eyes at her. "What's wrong?" Eve said, concerned now with the prolonged silence. She approached the bedside, putting a hand on Darius' back. "Did you have a nightmare?" Silence. Darius frowned. "I don't know." Something was fogging his brain. Was it just a dream? It felt too realistic. "You're worrying me," Eve said, even more concerned. "Me and your father have already made the table. Come eat. You'll get better, okay?" Father? Right. He had a father. Did he? Yeah. Yeah, he definitely did. What kind of human didn't have a father? Yes. He was human. And humans had both a mother and a father. Darius wordlessly nodded his head. Eve lingered for a few seconds, before reluctantly leaving him. Something's wrong. The dream. It was clawing at the back of his head. Like he was forgetting something. Something very important. Maybe dinner really would help. Darius got up. He was dressed in blue pajamas. Strange. Passing through a series of corridors, Darius made his way to the decorated living room. Strange. Since when had his house been this big? Eventually, he arrived at the living room. Opposite to a far side of a small, rectangular table covered with food, was a broad-shouldered, muscular man with a sharp jaw and short black hair. To the right was a modern kitchen, merged together with the living room. Eve was organizing plates. "There he is," the man exclaimed, smiling broadly with a set of perfect teeth. "What's with the glum look, big man?" "Malcolm." This was Malcolm King? Was he always like that? Darius had a nightmare. "Bad one," Eve said from the kitchen. "But he's better now, right?" "You're okay, boyo," Malcolm said warmly. "Come sit." Eve sat on the chair beside Malcolm. Reluctantly, Darius sat opposite to both of them. Something's wrong. This all feels off, Darius thought. But Darius obeyed. He sat at the table. Fresh eggs, made to look like a smiley face, with a side of vegetables were in front of him. Fork to the left, knife to the right. Darius gripped the fork and knife tightly. All the while, Malcolm and Eve looked at him with broad smiles and lines for eyes. Silence. The dream, Darius thought seriously. The dream. What was it? Think. Think. What was it? Dig through the fog. Think. Think. Darius didn't think. Liam acted. Gripping the knife, Liam snapped around and jammed it into his mother's throat. Blood sprayed in a wide arc as Eve clutched her throat with wide eyes, falling to the floor with a disturbing gurgle. Malcolm shouted in horror, rushing at Darius to disarm him with wide arms. Instinct kicked in. No.1b, in. Reversing the grip on his fork, he ducked under Malcolm's hug and stuck the fork right under his jaw. A stream of warm ichor painted Liam's face, dripping down his neck, down his pajamas. He weaved to the side and let his father's body fall to the floor. Both parents, dead. Liam was breathing heavily. Something in him snapped. For a split second, he remembered who he was, and he took action. A moment later, Liam stuck the knife into his own head, and as soon as he did. As though the world blinked, Liam had transitioned from the nightmare back into reality in an instant. Time seemed incredibly slow for a moment. The battle filled his vision. He was flying through a tunnel made of wind, fire, water and earth, formed with Ryu, Diriam, Jax and Arisa's efforts. Everything poured back into his memories. Now, he knew what happened. He'd been stuck in a trapped reality. A tiny little tick was dirtying his mind and biting his barrier, which somehow went past his guard. In the instant that Liam opened his eyes, he used his mental energy to insta-kill the tick. Liam had just experienced his worst fear. What was his worst fear? Being normal. Being mundane. Being average. This world of dog-eat-dog, kill or be killed was tailor-made for people like him. Liam smiled. And an unreasonable feeling to murder something grew in his chest. And he knew exactly where to direct it. Mental energy filled the slash in Liam's sea of consciousness. Slashes of honed darkness gathered around him in wide arcs. The breaker blade surged with power, turning heavier by the second. The dusk blades roared, absorbing fire from the tunnel Liam was passing through. The black blade hissed and split the air with slashes. On the other end of the tunnel was Nuran. Horseflies shot at Liam like bullets, but ricocheted off his cloak. A glimmer of dread formed in the tick's beady eyes. A moment later, Liam reappeared behind him. Sheeing. An X-shaped cross formed on Nuran's chest, gently splitting him into 4 different sections. The hive spasmed, jolted, and shrieked all at once as it fell apart like sand. Nuran was still alive. But the hive was no longer under his control. Chapter 397 Egg. For a split second, the battle came to a halt. The Imperialists just saw their leader get split apart. Nuran was the strongest of them. Granted, its strength was in its ability to control and manipulate abominations, but still. Seeing it divided equally in 4 parts was incredibly disturbing. A moment of hesitation was all the elders needed. 10 minutes later, the zeniths of the trapped reality colony were all defeated, but not killed. Liam walked up to Nuran and lifted it up. At least, what remained of it. It looked pretty pathetic. A steady stream of black blood poured from where it was cleaved apart. It moaned weakly in pain. Liam didn't want to kill it straight away. No. He needed to study this thing. After all, didn't Liam have illusion powers himself? What if he was able to learn it on a deeper level? That would make his king's eye much, much more powerful. Though, in all honesty, Liam knew the tick wouldn't give up its secrets. Nor could he sneakily pull it out of the abomination's head. All he could do was study it. Nov, LB1N. Liam put a palm on the tick's armored chest. Then, he attempted to use disfiguration. Amazingly, it actually worked. Well, why wouldn't it? Ticks were bloodsuckers, after all. KRSH. KRK. Krek. The wounds closed. The tick's exoskeleton slowly curved to compensate for the lack of body, and its legs and arms merged with its torso. The tick took an oval shape. Now, it resembled an egg of sorts. A name appeared in Liam's head. Dumpty. Dumpty coughed a mouthful of blood, which Liam quickly sidestepped. The elders watched with widened eyes. They'd never seen such an ability to transform things. Liam had never shown that ability before. Someone bind this thing in some chains, Liam called out, before moving towards the stone building. Jax whipped out a bundle of the ravenous leash chains, then ensnared it. An egg covered with chains. All in all, it looked quite funny. But the time for jokes was over. Save the zeniths and the rest for me, Liam said. After a short pause, the elders nodded. The cannibalism aspect of Liam's personality was well known to them by now. But at least he hadn't eaten any of them. Thus, they had no real issues with him. Now, it was time to establish the world gate. Jax took out the perfect stone slab from his ring, placing it above a flat chunk of stone and taking 10 steps back. A short silence ensued as Liam took out what looked like a black jade. It was a rank 4, one-time use inscribed item. In reality, jades could not be used over such incredibly long distances, just like their teleportation platform counterparts. However, this one was different, since it simply notified the person on the other side. Liam activated it. CRKSH. In a split second, it glowed incredibly bright, before fracturing apart. Another silence ensued. Abruptly, the stone slab unfolded like a masterfully made piece of engineering, building upon itself. This wasn't the first time Liam had seen something like this. The inscribed box he'd received during his trip to the Corson lands was similar to it. But instead of providing a small base, this had a much, much more complicated function. The world gate spread in a wide arc, expanding in size until it became a circular gate 7 meters in diameter. Dom. The gate flickered with a crystallized light, and the structure seemed to have concluded its transformation. It looked like a vertical, sparkling, crystal pond, since the light hadn't dissipated in the least. Ing. A moment later, a figure emerged from it. It was the Minister of Magic. The young, wizard-looking vampire with the funny-looking hat and wooden staff. Liam Royce? The wizard asked, scratching his head with squinted eyes. Is that you? Liam nodded. Used to have 2 arms, the magical minister said tiredly, his gaze sweeping the now-ruined colony. See, you've begun already. The minister always looked tired and weak, but Liam knew he was strong. Probably stronger than all the others, Liam thought. A moment later, the minister snapped his fingers. Wish. A wave of blue energy stemmed from his fingers and bolted towards the gate, causing it to flicker and brighten. Following that, more and more figures emerged from the gate, following 2 different lines. On one line was the Minister of Torture, Security, Defense, and all the others. They wore regal, black and red robes that seemed to contain the same red energy as Liam's redirection cloak. They looked excited. On the other, the remaining elders of the temple, each welcomed and put up to date with the events that already took place. They also looked excited. And finally, there was Kitsu, emerging from the gate with a loud, cat-like yawn. Having such a giant beast with them might look unintuitive to the untrained eye, but in reality, Kitsu's illusionistic abilities were far better compared to Liam's. She could camouflage entire battalions if need be. "See, you have them chained up, the Minister of Torture said. "You wouldn't mind me taking one, would you?" he asked Liam. The torturous minister was referring to the chained zeniths lying to the side. "I would," Liam responded firmly. The torture minister narrowed his crimson eyes, a dark glint reflected in them. "Plenty of flesh for you on the other side of this place," Darius said placatingly, noticing the tense atmosphere. Everyone else seemed to have noticed it too. The torture minister was blankly looking at Liam, silent as night. And Liam looked back, utterly unfazed, daring the bloodsucker to deny his authority. Silence. The torture minister grinned, revealing a set of cruel-looking teeth. "I have a feeling you'd last a long, long time under my instruments," the minister said quietly. "What a sight that'd be." Liam scoffed lightly, responding with a dismissive smirk. "Funny." "I was gonna say the same," Liam said. "Except I don't need to use instruments to cause pain." Chapter 398 Creep. The Minister of Torture winced at the comment, but before he could respond, the burly defense minister held his shoulder, denying his chance to retort. A moment later, the two headed towards the rest of the group. "Ah," the Minister of Magic said, sighing tiredly. "He's a bit of a creep." "Forgive him, yes? Please don't complain to the Pasha. Makes my life harder, you know? I don't want to deal with it." Liam scoffed, but he let his silence answer. He wasn't one to snitch. Nor did he really care. Eventually, the trapped reality colony was brimming with life again, housing a humble 18,000 cultivators from the temple, but just 12 ministers from the vampires. When all introductions and briefings were done with, the two groups were ready to part ways. "We'll be going, now," the Minister of Magic said, with the Security and Defense Minister to his side. "Bloodfang and Bloodclaw are with the Pasha, and they'll join us at the final battle." Liam nodded. He found it strange how the two strongest cultivators below Alucard himself didn't come. Bloodfang and Bloodclaw still had this unnerving aura to them, burned into Liam's memory. And for some reason, I can't even remember what they look like. And he really couldn't, he realized. Liam inwardly grimaced. No matter how much he racked his brain, he couldn't remember who sat on the chairs beside Alucard. Not even how tall they were, how they looked, or what clothes they wore. There was definitely nothing wrong with his memory. How could he remember Alucard, Yusin, all the other ministers, and Kitsu perfectly? Plus, a rank 3 magus had photographic memory, and even scents weren't forgotten. Forgetting something didn't happen, not even deliberately. No. Whatever it was something magical. And it was terrifying. Hiding one's abilities, appearance, and presence was rare, but possible. Case in point, Liam himself. But hiding their literal existence? That was just. I shouldn't get ahead of myself. I remember their aura, at least. They can't erase themselves completely. Nevertheless, Liam shook himself out of those thoughts and focused on the matter at hand. "All right then," the magic minister said, adjusting his hat. "I bid you good luck." The Minister of Magic outstretched his staff and pointed it at the ground, upon which a spark of bright blue light touched it. "Whom?" Upon which a perfect, incredibly long circular tunnel fit for their numbers opened up. Liam saw how it even barred other abominations from coming through. The tunnel walls crackled with that sapphire energy, insta-killing anything that got close, or that had lived in the ground already. Even rank 4 abominations. Wordlessly, the ministers gathered at the tunnel and entered it. Right before he entered the tunnel, the torture minister threw a dark glance at Liam. Liam responded with a smile. The magic minister gave Liam a nod, before entering the tunnel himself. A moment later, the tunnel closed upon itself, like an earthly wound healing itself. they were gone. Liam lingered in the trapped reality colony for a while. He had a few things on his plate. Quite literally. And learning more about the trapped reality's special illusionistic powers would benefit the king's eye greatly. The vampires had already ventured out and were making a beeline towards the Empire of Courage. Day by day, Liam realized just how complex the vampires really were. Who knew the extent of their powers? Who knew how much they were really hiding? A concern for later, Liam thought to himself. There's no need to think of toppling such an ancient, aged powerhouse. As of now, there were much more pressing matters at hand, and the dual empire was a much easier target. Until then, Liam looked back at his dainty little friend. Dumpty. They were in the remains of the tick building, in its eye. At least, what remained of it. Everything had been ravaged to an unrecognizable degree. Meanwhile, the creature looked at Liam with a palpable amount of hatred in its eyes. From a glorious shield on his back, to an angular, hardened chitin covering the rest of its body like armor, paired with dozens of powerful arms he could use to crush stone into rubble. To an egg. It couldn't even move itself. It simply rolled wherever Liam pushed it, and the humiliation was unbearable. Liam had restricted all of its organs by rewiring its insides, basically plugging wires into wrong sockets. Higher-ranked abominations actually housed much more easy-to-understand anatomies, since their functions were clear-cut. On the other hand, the insides of a low-ranking abomination looked like a hectic mix of flesh, veins and viscera, thrown together to form whatever monstrous creature it could. Liam yanked out one of Dumpty's ticks from its insides. The insects were produced from a special pair of glands located right beneath its stomach. An hour-long study session, with Dumpty cursing him to his 9 generations, Liam managed to figure out how the fingertip-sized tick worked. When it latched onto the mental sphere barrier, it didn't actually eat through it. Well, it did. But at such a slow pace, even if several years passed, it wouldn't be able to kill or maim someone through that method. Mental barriers were able to regenerate, after all. Nov/LBN. It wasn't too rare to have a few chips here and there after a battle, but they'd be gone after some time. Instead, the tick sucked onto the mind barrier, like a mosquito. Then, it sifted through the data provided to it by the iridescent scales of the mind. Then, it produced a poison-like substance from its behind, which contained what the individual considered to be their greatest fear. Its ability to identify which scales pertain to fear is actually amazing, Liam thought to himself, genuinely surprised. This brought him a little closer to his goal of permanent mental enhancements. But unfortunately, I won't be able to do anything with this until my mental faculties get better. As it is now, I can't access a person's memories by studying their mind scales. Maybe that'll change. Chapter 399 Spore Birds. 3 weeks passed. Soon enough, Liam was done with eating the rank 4 zeniths of the trapped reality colony. All 36 of them. Minus Dumpty, of course. The tick had to live. It had also been interrogated, but gave up nothing. Even after suffering several doses of corruption. Perhaps the fear of someone, or something, was far greater than whatever pain Liam put it through. Or maybe an abomination or binding oath stopped him from discussing any details. Still, Liam kept it alive, since it was the only source of those reality ticks he studied. In a way, this invasion helped Liam out big time. Eating so many bodies back to back gave him a small boost in basically everything. Sea of consciousness. Blood. Chaos pearl. Body. Core. But it still didn't grant him an advancement in any of them. Not yet. Most of the weaker cultivators were basically snacks for him. With enough power to battle 3 zeniths at the same time and win, it was a favor to the world that Liam's progress was sluggishly slow. Otherwise, with the rate he trained with, and his peculiar method of simply devouring stronger beings to gain power, he would have far outgrown his peers. N0 Veld 1N. To an extent, he already had. But the opposition would be failing miserably if Liam had become a zenith at such a young age. It's about time we moved. Pretty soon, though, it was time to leave the trapped reality colony. Everything was pretty much in order. The acolytes were prepared, hungry for war and battle. All they waited for was Liam, but they didn't have the courage to tell him to hurry up, nor were they allowed to. Liam was the authority. And, well, the threat Liam made of cutting off Neri, Johann and Ian's hands echoed throughout the 18,000. Yeah. They'd rather just give him time. Liam's main concern was the mega colony, and higher-ranking abominations that could hinder their path. Though, all roads eventually led to there, one way or the other. Smack dab in the middle of the war between the two empires. The line. Right now, Liam was somewhere around the edges of the Empire of Fear. Around the curve where the baguette-shaped lands were still moving upward. The deeper they went down, the longer, more difficult the fights would get. Navigating the raw, cursed lands was also extremely difficult. If this stupid black mist wasn't there, the Empress Lair would probably be visible from here. But it's not. We'll take out at least a dozen colonies before we get to that point. A few months will pass. But by then, we'd have done enough damage. There's a limit to how much we could really do without being captured. Imagining the grand battle that would ravage these lands, Liam's lips curled slightly to form a subconscious smile. I wonder how many bodies I'll be able to rake in, Liam thought, smiling. As long as that eye-twitching leech doesn't touch any of them. Liam commanded the 18,000 battalion to leave the colony. Everyone was huddled together in a circular formation, with Kitsu in the middle, and Liam perched atop its head. On Kitsu's forehead was an amplifying device for its mental waves. It looked like a series of small and large satellite dishes, which helped quintuple and spread the fox's range for illusions. Though, Kitsu looked extremely pissed off. Why? Well, she didn't want to put the helmet on. In her own words, she felt extremely stupid when wearing it. But it had no choice. However, as a result, the 18,000 acolytes, disciples, and elders blended in perfectly with the ugly environment. Kitsu's mental waves acted like a perfect invisibility cloak. However, that didn't mean that the group was safe from abominations. They were still attacked now and again as they moved forward. However, with her illusions, the fox could block out sound. There were special properties to her mental waves. Kitsu's entire bloodline was specialized in making illusions as realistic as possible, and depending on how much complexity she added to them, they could even have consistency. And with that came sound manipulation. It was highly unlikely Liam could obtain the same ability. But one could hope. The tight-knit formation continued until the temple arrived at a massive colony. On Liam's orders, they'd actually avoided most of the weaker ones. It wasn't because they weren't worth his time. In reality, the lower-ranking colonies were tighter knit together as they went deeper and deeper into the dark lands. They visited each other daily. If Liam chose to attack them, they'd have to get rid of several colonies at the same time, and that would thin out their forces. The thinner their forces, the greater the risk. However, the larger, major colonies didn't have this problem. Since they were deeper down, only elites filled them. This obviously meant that the battle would be much harder. But it was worth it. This one was 6 times as big as the trapped reality colony, and 6 times as strong, too. The spore bird colony. Creatures that could make deadly fungus grow on a person's body with insane speed, then make it explode. But there was a glaring difference. Before, there were 3 dozen zeniths and no acolytes. Now, there was 18,000. Granted, the massive colony housed a similar number. But they didn't know they were being attacked. It was another massacre. They mowed down the colony like weeds to a scythe. It took a while, though. The spore birds were disgustingly fast, and their fungus abilities actually killed off a few acolytes. But bombs, fire, and wind proved to be their weakness. Like this, Liam and the temple cleared open a path. Day by day, they were getting closer to the line. 4 months passed. At one point, bringing down colonies required excessive planning and arduous preparation. But they'd brought down 12. And several changes happened. But it wasn't long before Liam had finally glanced at the so-called mega colony. And it was massive. Chapter 400 True Fear. Liam was now 22 years old, plus 7 months. During the 4 months, he'd been incredibly busy. Nothing changed feature-wise. He was still the same, four-armed, tentacle-back, claw-having creature as always. But the first thing of note that happened was Liam's advancement to the solid stage. Quite frankly, the sheer number of bodies Liam had gulped down was disgusting. Not taste-wise, of course. Taste-wise, they were actually pretty delicious. Literal-wise, he was getting just a tad bored with the rinse and repeat pattern of eating, digesting, and eating again. Nevertheless, as soon as Liam became a solid-stage cultivator, his core rumbled with power, then filled him with warm, euphoric energy. The darkness inside was significantly purer, including the natural aura that now pulsed throughout his entire being. With power like this, Liam wondered how it was that he ever won against a zenith. Or how he even killed one. Or how he even killed 3, at the same time, too. But that was easily explainable. The versatility that Liam could express was far beyond the norm of any man-made standard. He literally had a tool for everything. Thus, it was slightly more believable when considering just how great Liam's arsenal really was. With this, I'll be able to make rank 4 inscribed items regularly, Liam thought, smiling. Truth be told, in favor of his other aspects of work, Liam had put off most of his primordial forging projects. And his blood weaving, for that matter. He hadn't made a new technique in a while due to time restraints and pressing matters. What he needed urgently was actually a rank 5 body technique, since his progress was far slower without one. After all, he'd pretty much spent years in the same, middle-tier substage. It was the only thing he had in the zenith ranks. Hence why the rest of his centers of power were holding him back. They were too far behind, while Liam's body was too far ahead. But since his triumvirate body was so different, Liam simply couldn't have Ucladd or anyone else make a rank 5 method for him. He had to do it himself. But something told him that doesn't really apply to the triumvirate body. It was no longer something that functioned like a normal human body. Plus, having 6 arms was a major change, and it would obviously affect his future techniques. If I can just utilize my devour and digest method, it'll be much, much easier than making a rank 5 body tempering technique. On the other hand, Liam had been wanting to make a new sword. Just to strengthen his sword style, if anything. Being too dependent on his chaos, corruption, and void wasn't wise, especially when considering how his reserves weren't too vast. Nonetheless, Liam continued on the downward slope. Soon enough it became like hiking down a steep mountain. But finally, they laid their eyes on the mega colony. Well, they were still thousands and thousands of kilometers away. In fact, the only way Liam could see it was through the king's eye, and the others could see it through vision-enhancing techniques or inscribed items. The mega colony was a grim metropolis. It had no barrier. Why would it? It filled the horizon with morbid, imposing, menacing structures that dominated the skies. Spires twisted towards the dark clouds like snakes, monolithic obelisks were studded to the ground, which gave off a suffocating aura to any who saw it, deformed, teeth-like buildings that spread in all directions. Abominations were everywhere. In the sky. Perched on top of the buildings like gargoyles. Slithering under the ground like snakes. But in the center of it all was one tower. It was insanely tall, and got thinner and thinner towards its peak. Even from the distance Liam was at, the thing stuck out like a needle from all the others. By earthly standards, it would be about 213 stories tall. And when Liam's gaze barely fell on the peak of the tower, his vision swam. End/oval bin. The color drained from his sight, turning into swirly lines of black and white hues, like white mist blown in darkness. A moment later, Liam began vomiting his guts out. At the same exact time, everyone else who had the misfortune of gazing at the peak of the needle suffered the same fate. They began puking until they no longer could, some even passing out unconscious with their bowels emptying. Still coughing, Liam forced his body to relax and stabilize. He used all the mental defenses he could, but the nauseating feeling was still there. It was like his soul was pierced by whatever that was. Noticing his state, Jane tried to give him a pill, but he held up a hand, ushering himself into a small tent they'd erected a few minutes prior. Closing himself off, he fell on the ground, clutching himself. Slowly, whatever had affected him was starting to wear off. It's just a mental trick, Liam thought, heaving for air. Just fear. It's just fear. Just fear. Slowly, Liam realized that his legs were trembling uncontrollably. And his hands. And his entire body. From fear. It was then that Liam realized something else. The trapped reality tick worked depending on what that person considered their greatest fear. But for someone who lived relatively peacefully, their nightmare would be far tamer compared to what a hardened veteran of war would experience. And Liam wasn't afraid of almost everything. Magical beasts, rank 5 cultivators, abominations. He'd been faced with everything, and fear was like poison. The more one was injected with, the more their immunity. But now? Now, he realized he was overestimating himself a little too much. The Empress of Fear made him vomit his guts out from thousands of kilometers away, and was probably unaware of doing so. Still. A quiet laugh rose in Liam's chest, even as he shook and breathed heavily like he'd been stung by a viper. Would Liam back out now? No. When life gives you lemons, you squirt them in your eyes and relish the pain. Besides, that wasn't his battle to fight. It was Ucladd and Ucladd's. In fact, Liam was not entering the mega colony. Not yet. He was going around it and heading for the line. A few colonies were left. Just a few more. All Liam could do was do what he did best. Killing things and getting stronger.